even if it's an online business, you still got to put a shit ton of work into it. You have to build the modules, you have to build the products, you have to build the website, you have to build the web store, because I remember you kind of agonizing over your website and the learning curve that went along with that.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's a lot of work that went into it. You want to expand on that or tell us more about that?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Yes, that was me reading the intro for the first time for this episode with Evan Levy. But we get into the weeds on the subject of building an online business, because he built one from scratch. We're talking he built the modules that you can order online. He scaled it to grow, and then he had to get his website up. He had to get his e-commerce. He had to link his bank account, all of those things. So all of the work that went into setting up his online business, that's before he even launched it. And then after you launch it, then you have to talk about marketing, sales, customer experience, make sure everything's running smooth. So then things change. The entire business plan changed once you launch the business. So Evan can walk us through some of that, and we just have a good time. He's a coffee buddy of mine. He lives here in town. He's well respected. Used to be a strength and conditioning coach with the St. Louis Blues organization. He's worked with several national team and several national team development programs, as well as NHL players, several current NHL players. So the guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to training, but we're talking about setting up his online training business, because I haven't really run across anybody who has a bang-up online training business. So that's why I was really interested when Evan took on this project. Smart guy. We have a lot of fun. He's a good friend of mine. We meet for coffee like 2 or 3 times a month just to chat and catch up. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to have him on the podcast. So hope you enjoyed this conversation with Evan. If you're thinking about opening an online business as a standalone venture, or if you are going to do it as something, an add-on to your current business. Either way, the blueprint, he lays out the blueprint for a successful online business. So enjoy this conversation with my good friend, Evan Levy.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Masters in Fitness Business Podcast, where you get to stand on the shoulders of giants. And today I have a local giant in the form of Evan Levy. Evan and I are coffee buddies. We get coffee on a regular basis. We've been to just about every Starbucks, I think, within a 3-mile radius of my business. And we sit down and we just chat, man. And he recently started an online training business. Actually 2 online training businesses, Rise of the Hockey Player and Sleep Better Life. And he's just a good friend of mine. He's got an impressive resume. He's interned with Mike Boyle. He's interned with Mark Verstegen down at Athletes Performance before the Exos days. He has been the strength and conditioning coach for the Chicago Wolves, St. Louis Blues, AHL affiliate, worked with many of the Blues that you saw win the Stanley Cup this year. So, I mean, and he was also working for the Hungarian National Hockey program. So he is my main man in Budapest. He's hoping to go back in Budapest to Hungary to work with that association again. If he does, I will definitely come to visit him, and we'll be hanging out in Budapest, and I'll keep you guys updated. But with no further ado, I give you my main man, Evan Levy. Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, and you're the legend. So
not even. So when you started, after you got back from Hungary, you were like over there for 8 months, and then you were kind of wondering what the next step was, and then you started putting together this online training module based on your experience with working with some of the professional hockey players. You want to walk our listeners through that process?
Sure. So initially when I went to Hungary, it was an opportunity to work with a larger audience. So in Hungary at the time when I went there, it was based around development, starting with U8 all the way up to professional, and that includes a national program. And so that experience for me was opening my eyes up to as a human being in other countries and working with different people and different populations. And so I fell in love with it, to be honest, because one day I could be on the ice or in the weight room with U8 or anywhere up to U15 or professional, and then the next day I could be on the other side of the country working with a different club with a different level. And it was more on a consulting basis to really get a feel of how to grow their hockey performance programs in the whole country. So coming off of that, my thoughts were, how do I find a way to connect with more people all over the world? And that's where online business came into play for me. So I came up with Rise of the Hockey Player as my first idea, because I've worked in hockey in so long. And so I wanted to create a source for people all over the world. It's not just me being in the United States or even being close to Canada. It's everywhere. Excited me because I found when I was in Hungary, there were so many players, coaches, and teams that wanted resources just like I had seen in the United States, and then working with players and teams from Canada as well. So Rise of the Hockey Player came about because I wanted to continue on this path to just open up my mentorship, I call it, to anybody and everybody. And to be honest, the way I designed Rise of the Hockey Player and Sleep Better Life, I call it a mentorship program where it's about giving information so people can really find their curiosity. And if they have that curiosity, that's when they're going to want to use it as I think it's necessary. Because a common thing I've seen within the team atmosphere, or even just modern day performance enhancement, is a lot of players really want to know why they're doing something. And people talk about it a lot. So with Rise of the Hockey Player and Sleep Better Life, the main focus was my online program, which Rise of the Hockey Player is called Post-Game Sleeplessness, the Kryptonite of Hockey Performance, and Sleep Better Life is called The Sleepless Human Being, and that's geared towards the general population. And they're both 15 module programs, and I call them like a visual audio book. So when someone goes through each of them, they push play and they see the visuals and they go through modules and lessons, but it's more so passive and simple for them to retain the information, just like when someone watches your podcast. And as you know, a lot of people can listen to podcasts over and over again. So it seemed like a good model as far as information retention, as I like to say it. And as far as the business model goes, the big thing that I do to drive it is really enhance my social media, but I pour all my passion from my knowledge and my education into the social media. So like if you go on my Instagram, the posts are really visual. They're really well thought out as far as my avatar, my mentality. But I look at that as the big education piece because, as you know, just a little bit of something every single day can make a difference in how you think about things and how you develop the wisdom of things. And so with Rise of the Hockey Player, and Sleep Better Life, again, I wouldn't call them necessarily training per se. I would call them mentorship programs so people can go and learn this information, whether you're in hockey or you're just someone of the general population, to learn more about why people aren't sleeping well. And then specifically with hockey, why players have trouble sleeping, not just after games, but on a nightly basis.
Gotcha. A couple of things, and I really want to dig into that and kind of unpack that a little bit. First, you said that players and really consumers, they're really educated these days, and they do their research, and it takes a minute for them to pull the trigger on anything.
Sure.
Because they want to gather as much information, comparison shop, all that good stuff. So, how do you structure the modules in your model to capture that educated consumer?
So, I mean, that really starts with the social media, in my opinion. So in my social media, the way I'm designing it is more about building the community on my social media because, and I'll give Gary Vaynerchuk credit for all this. He talks about patience, not just in online business, but in any business. So the way I'm looking at this is I got to give value as much as possible for long periods of time in order to get any of my consumers really interested and trusting of my mindset and my material. And I'll give Seth Godin credit to this. When he talks about finding your tribe, I will say I've been willing to accept that when I do my social media, that it's not like I'm going for that instant sale. I'm not going door to door. I'm just thinking, how do I give value over and over again, which is a longer process, but it's really more about the patience of it. And then after that, I try to offer something with free training. So then on my website, when you go there and if you subscribe, on each website, I offer a free training, which goes through some different ideas, but also really lays out my mindset of the whole program and with my online programs. And then after that, I have my online programs, which is a lower cost point, which I really like for different markets globally, especially if it happens to be a lower economic market. The price point I can keep lower so I can include more people. And then after that, the one-on-one mentorship comes in. If someone is really like, you know what, Evan, I really want to work with you one-on-one and I want to be really concrete with understanding this information. And then we go from there. And then with Rise of the Hockey Player, if a team wants to hire me to be a consultant or do something like I did in Hungary this past year, then that option's available. So it's working on all these different places, but also focusing really on just giving the value over and over again so they find trust in me as a person. Gotcha.
And I think that's so key what you said, is because I think the threshold for people paying information today is really high. And so I think you have to give a lot away for free. And it's about building trust and establishing yourself as the expert in that niche. And you've kind of carved out that niche. And so you talked about giving away a lot of free information, building that trust, establishing yourself as a trusted source, and then having different levels of products that they could purchase, kind of if they want to stick their toe in the water first before they dive head in. So let's talk about the avatar. So what are your avatars for both of your businesses, both for Rise of the Hockey Player and Sleep Better Life? And how did you come up with that avatar?
So, I have a personal story that kind of goes along with a part of me learning this knowledge. So it was about 9 years ago now where I developed an excessive urination issue, where I got to the point where I was pissing 70 times a day. And it got so bad I had to sleep in a bathtub 3 nights in a row because I just couldn't stop pissing. And that's where, Tony Robbins likes to say we learn by desperation or inspiration. And I love that quote because it just got to that point where I needed both. And so when that happened to me, I started seeking out new information and also getting new mentors to learn about different ways of how to look at the body and the metabolism. So that avatar became very organic and unique, where what I offer is a very different perspective. And it's not the right or wrong perspective, it is just different. So when I talk about my methodology being different, when I started developing my business model, for example, Rise of the Hockey Player, why did that name come up? It was just something where I was like, well, when I've worked with players and they've come across my methodology, then they've done things in their way that they've never seen before. Again, it's not right or wrong, it's just what I've seen. And then when I went over to my social media and started experimenting and trying and also learning, from some very well-done marketers, I was thinking, what is something that is authentic to me, that goes on in my head, and how I want to deliver this information, and be willing to accept that not everybody is going to love my avatar, but I'm looking for my tribe that is going to be willing to enjoy it. So when as developing my avatar, I just started kind of having fun with social media as far as my visuals, my videos, my copywriting, WRIT, just to see how not only did it feel to the consumer, but also how I felt about it. So to kind of go back to the beginning, everything with me is very unique to me and how I built this. And that's why, you see my avatar with a lot of big visuals like that.
Okay. And then, so what's your demographic with your Gen Pop business?
Right now, I would say that the biggest people that have the most interest, I definitely have an age range from 35 to 44, but then I also have 55 to 65. And so the older we get, a big thing that happens is sleep function starts to diminish, generally speaking. It's not the same for everybody, but just generally speaking. And if you think about when we go back to babies, that's when most of the time we sleep the most, and that's where we have the least amount of stress. As we get older, every year, every decade, every few decades, that's when we can see stress increase if it's not dealt with appropriately. And as a result, thoughts become so overwhelming and energy input becomes low that we start to see sleep decrease even more and more. So when it gets to the older population, like 50, or we'll say 50s and 60s, I shouldn't say older, no respect to you, you're an animal.
Right, yeah.
Me being young and dumb with what I say.
That's okay. I'm your demographic for sure. Yeah.
Oh no, dude, I learned from the best. So,
Yeah.
it just, I have a feeling that's a big reason why, in the 50s and 60s, because some people are so exhausted from the stress and burdens they've built up in their life that, finding new, unique ways and opening up their mindsets to it is really popular. Also, when you look at your 30s and 40s, there's a lot of people that go through a lot of life transitions during that time. And then along the way, there's things they might have been doing that was disrupting their energy input to help with stress reduction and relaxation, especially before bedtime. So there could be many different reasons, but that's how I'm computing it at this point.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the other thing that you talked about is just the consistency of your messaging. So, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially on social media. They, first of all, they don't know what their demographic or what their custom client avatar looks like.
Sure.
And you really have to know what demographic, what niche, and what your client avatar looks like, so you can really speak to those people instead of just kind of shotgun approach and trying to, cast as big a net as possible. Because when you talk to kind of inexperienced business owners when they're open to business, and you ask them, well, who's your ideal client? And they say everybody. That's dead wrong. Nobody can serve everyone. So, the same people that go to Saks don't go to Walmart. You know what I mean? So you have to know your demographic, what your ideal client looks like, what your client avatar looks like, so that you can craft your message to speak directly to them and dive deep into that niche. And then when you speak to them, you have to be consistent with your message. You can't bounce all over the place.
Sure, of course.
You have to be consistent. So you want to share some tips and tricks that you've implemented to help you do just that?
Well, I'll be very humble and transparent when I say, my mindset is different from a brick and mortar business owner because the overhead is different. Mm-hmm. So when I put my business model together, I'm thinking to myself, I'm sending out a message, but subconsciously, I know my overhead is much lower than a brick and mortar inventory employee driven business owner. And I have all respect for people that do brick and mortar, because that is a lot of work and that is a lot of hustle to get that done. So when time is more of an essence in that situation, especially with the overhead and those other factors, hyper targeting, or maybe not even hyper targeting, but targeting very aggressively, I think is more critical if I was in that situation. Right now with online business, I am learning more about targeting, but because I know that I can play this long because the overhead is lower and I don't have physical inventory and I don't have employees, then I can play the patience long game, which Gary Vee talks about a lot. Ty Lopez, who I've been mentored through one of his programs, really makes it evident to me of how much you can play with your business models when you have access to the internet. So I would say, I target more as I move forward, but also developing my online presence. I've been developing my avatar more so, putting it out there and seeing who really has interest as they come to it. And then as they come more and more, that's when I start focusing my time towards those people. But I would say it's a lot different than, you have set up shop, in University City, and you have so many specifics that you have to focus on in that area, and you do your online presence. But me, is because I am online, my presence is all online. I focus globally. It's a different scenario, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Which is why I wanted to have you on the show to talk about the specifics and the differences between having an online model versus a brick and mortar. Because, like I talked to you, I haven't talked to anybody who has just a bang up online training business, other than these Instagram fools out here.
You call me a fool, man? Is that what you're saying?
No, but you know what I'm talking about. These, I'm just going to say it. These, Instagram people that put these shit programs and shit programming out and say, DM me, if you want to learn how to, look like me or whatever, if you want to get 6-pack abs and, spend your summers in Ibiza, then DM me and I can show you how to live this life or whatever. But there's a lot of shit out there, man. There really is. And I think that's part of the reason why the threshold for paid information is so high, because there's a lot of just bullshit out there in social media. So that's why I wanted to have you on to see what the differences are. And that was one of the main differences. So you can kind of play around with your model to see who your demographics is, who it fits, and then slowly start to target them. Is that basically what you're saying?
Essentially, yeah. And, I'll talk about Ty Lopez real quick, just because Ty, he did a YouTube clip where he talked about the power of 12. You should go on dates with 12 different business models before it finally hits. And if you think about it, if you heard that back in the 80s or the 90s, when it was more brick and mortar, that would probably seem pretty overwhelming, where it's like, wow, like I have to come up with 12 different brick and mortar business models. That's a lot of work. But now when he said that, I was thinking more terms, okay, I can test different online business ideas because of the situation with the inventory, the employees, and then the lower overhead because there's no brick and mortar. So that model, I think, can be effective, and there's a lot of people doing well with it. But it's a new way of business and entrepreneurship, I would say.
Yeah, and I think anybody who brick and mortar or online, you have to have a business model going in. You just can't fly by the seat of your pants. But everybody that I've talked to, myself included, start out with a model, and then you open your business, and the day you open your business, your model changes.
Sure.
And continues to change and continues to evolve, and so that you can keep up with the market and be successful. So I think that's definitely true. And talking about your model, so you built in levels. You want to go over those levels and why you put them in?
As far as levels of business or revenue?
Levels of paid products.
Sure. Basically, it goes. My original idea of this was, after spending time in Hungary, I saw that, for example, in hockey, the market is so much vast than I thought. And so, it's not just being in Hungary, but when I was over there, I saw different markets. Even I had no idea that Romanian hockey had the levels that they do. I've ended up consulting with their national team captain. And so, with that, it just immediately opened my mind that, wow, maybe there's so many more markets that I can hit all over the world. How can I do that? And also, how can I be more understanding and empathetic of, the different economic statuses in every market? And so with my main online program, it's 15 modules, but I set it at a price point where it's to get people interested in finding value in me, but it's a lower risk investment. And that comes after the free training, and that comes after my newsletter, actually, which I do have an email newsletter and bring up, and then, all of my social media platforms. So even when I meet someone and they want to know more about me, instead of sending them to my website, I say, check out my social media so you can start learning, and really focus my attention every day on learning from the social media. And then again, we go into the free training, and then I offer different packages at times where you can get, on the phone with me. That's not included in the one-on-one mentorship, and then go into the online program, which is a small price point where you can get a lot of information over 15 modules. And then if someone really needs to get serious, they go into the one-on-one mentorship.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I remember when we were sitting and talking, and you were just starting to build the modules out, and you were, pun intended, pulling your hair out, because it was such
Not
tedious.
right here, man.
Right. Yeah. And because it was just such tedious and work, and so front end loaded. You want to walk us through that process and how you started that, and how you kind of fumbled your way through it, until you got familiar with it?
Sure, of course. I remember one time I was listening to a discussion between Tim Ferriss and Neil Strauss on his podcast, and they were talking about writing, and Tim Ferriss brings up writer's block, and Neil Strauss goes, there's no such thing as writer's block, there's only performance anxiety, and that was a smack to Tim's face. And so I thought about that when I was putting together my words, my methodology, where I was like, okay, putting something down is better than nothing, because I didn't know when I started building the 15 modules how it was going to look at the end. Okay. So basically just any thoughts that I had that I wanted to share, I started putting it down just on a PowerPoint. So I'd pull up a PowerPoint, start typing it out, and then save it, and boom, go on to the next one. And just more and more I'd go through thoughts. And then I was like, okay, I need to start practicing recording. So then I would start recording. And then the more I started recording, the more I realized I didn't sound as good as I needed to. So then I had to go back and do that again.
Were these audio or videos?
These are audios.
Okay, gotcha.
So I focus on, and the reason why I did that is because I wanted to be something where it was the easiest possible for someone to retain the material. So like a great example, there's one player that has taken my program. After games, he'll pull up this program on his phone and just sit there, and he'll either look at it and see the words and the visuals I have, just like if it was a class program, or he can just look back and look out the window and listen at the same time. So the goal of it is that's why I call it like a visual audio book, so it's easy for anyone to pick up on it. And so going through it, again, I would start speaking and going through each lesson and module. And sometimes when I would speak the way I wrote it, I'd have to go back and change it because it didn't flow the way that I thought it would when I initially put it together. So when you talk about pulling my hair out, there'd be days where I would be doing it for 12 hours, just going back and forth, just because I didn't know how the delivery was going to be. And then, of course, it just kept building. I did a beta test group, see what they thought, took some feedback, and then had to go through it again. So, it takes some time putting your butt in the chair and just getting after it.
And grinding. And I think that's important for anybody with an online business or even a brick and mortar or think about starting an online business to know is that I think some people kind of get pie in the sky and they think, oh, online business, I can just sit at home in front of my computer and just walk out to the mailbox and collect all the checks. And that's not the case. Even if it's an online business, you still got to put a shit ton of work into it. You have to build the modules, you have to build the products, you have to build the website, you have to build the web store, because I remember you kind of agonizing over your website and the learning curve that went along with that.
Sure.
So I mean, there's a lot of work that went into it. You want to expand on that or tell us more about that?
Sure. I mean, when I first built my website, again, I didn't know how I wanted to deliver myself. And to be honest, so after I launched my business, I told people I knew about it, and I said, I want you to give me feedback on my website now. In the first week, I already did an overhaul on my website because I knew how I saw it wasn't going to be the same as the viewer or the consumer saw it. And again, I'll give Gary Vee credit because he said, putting something out is better than not doing it at all, but just have a learning perspective. So as soon as I put it out there, like I just messaged a bunch of people, say, look at my website and anything I should change, tell me now. And so I did an overhaul right from the get-go, but I had no insecurity about that because I'm sure, you have more experience in business than me. Nothing is ever perfect right from the beginning, but also everybody doesn't remember your past. And so I was willing to accept that what I did up front isn't necessarily where it is now. And people have so many things on their minds. They don't necessarily, there's some that will, but they don't necessarily just think about how I started. So that with the website, it took some time for me to play with that. But then also the other different outsourcing that I do. So for my online program, I use Thinkific to make my online program in the form of a course, which is really valuable. Anyone looking to put a course together or an online program, I would highly recommend checking that out. This was a unique one, which my dad thought I was nuts. So since I'm selling globally, I had to learn more about the VAT and sales tax in different countries and all the loopholes. So like at first I was like going through every single country, seeing what it was, what I need to be prepared to declare or not to declare if it goes that way. And there is an online program called Quaderno, which if you get it, it automatically deducts the sales and VAT taxes in every state, every country, and so on. And then you can connect that to your QuickBooks or your e-commerce, like your PayPal, Stripe, or whatever it might be. So I had to integrate my website, my Thinkific, with Quaderno, with my QuickBooks, and so on, which up front, if you're not someone who's computer or tech savvy, it might sound overwhelming, but, in my opinion, they do a really good job with customer service and teaching you how to get through that. And you can just click on YouTube, of course, and get all the tutorials you need. So that is some of the other kind of the background of putting the whole thing together.
Yeah, because I know you worked your ass off with Thinkific, putting those modules together, not to mention the whole e-commerce side, which is a whole nother learning curve on top of the website, and tweaking that to where you can optimize it. And that's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
And that's before you even launch the business. And then when you launch the business, now we got to talk about customer service, marketing, all of that stuff. So you want to share some of that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as far as customer service goes, I mean, since it's something I enjoy and I'm trying to bring in my tribe and that's how my avatar does it, for the majority of time, at least thus far, the people that reach out to me, it's exciting to talk to them to see what their interest is, how I can be helpful to them, and start talking shop. As far as the marketing goes, the big thing that's been the best for me, again, goes back to my Instagram, my Facebook business, and then even my LinkedIn. And the way I think about that is, from a marketing perspective, I combine my mentality with marketing and teaching all into one. And there was actually a girl I was masterminding with. She's selling her artwork, and she's all about creativity. So every day when she's doing her artwork, she's got these beautiful canvases that she's going through. And I said, why don't you just take your mindset for that and put it into your Instagram? So every time you're on your Instagram, it's not stressful when you think of it from a marketing or networking basis. It's just you doing more artwork. So for me now, when it comes to the marketing aspect, I put myself in a place where I'm enjoying the process of posting more and more, because it's me actually teaching through marketing, not just maybe running an ad and just letting it go. It's every day, literally trying to engage and kind of use social media as it can be, where it's to network and engage with people, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is, so you do mostly, it's an online business, so you probably do most of your marketing through social media, if not all.
Yes. I've played with some ads, and I've had some success in certain ways, but I have come to the conclusion thus far is, with my concepts and my ideas, it's not the same as a popular product idea. So like one of my other businesses, which we didn't discuss, is social media marketing for some small businesses. If I'm in a conversation,
which you kind of fell into by accident, but
yeah, I started getting into social media, and I got, a lot of enjoyment out of it doing it. And then some other people got interested. And that's what honestly brought me to Ty Lopez and learning from him and his social media marketing program. And so then I just started doing social media as a business as well. And the interesting thing about, what I was getting at is if I go up to someone and they ask what I do, and I talk about Rise of the Hockey Player and Sleep Better Life, they're like, oh, that's interesting. But then when I say, oh, and I do social media marketing for small businesses, they're like, really? Oh, I could use your help with that. I need help with that. Like, we should talk. So, that was an understanding business in the marketplace. And there's so many brilliant business people that probably could hear this and think, well, like, duh. But for me, when it comes to me putting a lot of money into advertising with Rise of the Hockey Player and Sleep Better Life, it seems more apparent to think of the long game and having patience with my ideas, just like Gary Vee talks about, where every day I'm just giving value and I'm teaching and just sticking with it for years to come, because I truly enjoy it, thinking less of, okay, how do I get the sale? How do I get the sale right now? If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you recently started doing some of the social media marketing for small businesses. So what are some of the most common mistakes that you see small businesses making with their social media marketing?
Well, the number one thing I come across is they don't see the benefit of it because they weren't taught that. So like there's a lot of businesses will be sitting down and we'll be talking and going through stuff, and they started their business and the social media aspect was an inclusion of it. And it could be all different ages, but if I have an older business owner who they've been successful in certain businesses in the early 2000s and the 90s and the 80s, then they know in the back of their mind a way of how to be successful without social media, but maybe they're also not realizing how important it can be now. So I could be talking to someone about social media and they're just kind of like, yeah, you know, I don't know if we really need it, that type of thing. But the way I look at it is when I try to explain it is, I mean, there's so many different platforms out there. If you're struggling in your business and you're not posting, you know, on every single platform, and there's, I mean, if you type in Google, there might be 50 to 100